The blizzard erased the road behind her, and the future ahead. One wrong move and her children would freeze. One wrong choice and they might never be found. Her fingers were numb. She hugged her children tighter, teeth chattering, their breath fogging in the freezing air. Then headlights appeared. A gang of Hell's Angels stopped, leather and chrome etched with frost. One stepped forward, eyes fierce beneath his helmet. "Come with me," he growled. She hesitated, and then suddenly, "Before I continue, let me know in the comments, have you subscribed to the channel or not? And also tell me which city and country you are watching from, so that I can thank you personally." The blizzard had swallowed the road whole. Sky and ground had become one. A white, merciless void where direction no longer mattered. The wind screamed through the trees like a warning, meant for no one who could hear it anymore. This was the kind of storm that erased footprints, erased time, erased people. Sarah Miller stood frozen on the shoulder of the highway, clutching her children beneath her torn winter coat. Her lips had turned blue, her fingers were numb. Her chest felt tight, as if the cold had reached inside and wrapped itself around her heart. In her arms lay her newborn baby, far too still. That terrified her the most. In front of her stood two little girls. Emma, the older one, tried to be brave, but fear had aged her eyes beyond her years. Lucy clung to her mother's coat with white knuckles, as if letting go would cause the world itself to fall apart. "Mom, when are we going home?" Emma's voice trembled, barely louder than the wind. Sarah had no answer. Home was no longer a place. It was a memory. Since her husband's death, everything had collapsed quietly. Unpaid rent, eviction notices, phone calls that stopped being answered, promises that disappeared. The bus station was closed. Her phone battery had died hours ago. No cars had passed in what felt like an eternity. And now, this road. Then it came. At first, it was distant, low, thunderous, not the wind. Engines. Sarah's heart slammed against her ribs. Through the falling snow, 2 bright circles of light appeared, then 4, then 6. The growl grew louder, vibrating through the frozen ground. Motorcycles. They slowed, then stopped. The sudden silence was heavy, unnatural. Snow continued to fall, but time itself seemed to pause. Sarah instinctively pulled her children closer behind her. Stories flooded her mind. Headlines, warnings, whispered fears, leather jackets, tattoos, beards, men who lived outside the rules, Hell's Angels. 4 riders dismounted. Their boots sank into the snow. One of them removed his helmet. His hair fell to his shoulders, damp with snow. A thick beard framed his face. His eyes were hard, but not empty. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She tightened her grip on the baby. "Please." The word escaped her lips without permission. "We don't want any trouble." The man stepped forward. The others stayed back. No weapons were drawn, no voices were raised. "You can't stay out here," he said. His voice was deep, controlled, not threatening. "This storm kills." Tears burned in Sarah's eyes. "My kids." Her voice broke. The man's gaze dropped to the children. Bare hands, thin coats, shaking bodies. Something shifted in his expression. Something old. Buried. Behind him, one of the bikers muttered quietly, "They won't make it out here, Jack." Jack. The man in front was their leader. Jack looked back at Sarah. Seconds passed. Snow gathered on their shoulders. The wind howled around them. Then Jack did something she didn't expect. He took off his jacket. The movement stunned her. "Wrap them in this," he said, extending it toward her. "Now." Her hands shook as she took the heavy leather coat. Fear still gripped her, but the cold was winning. The children couldn't endure much longer. "We're not here to hurt you," Jack said steadily. "But if you stay, this storm won't show mercy." Sarah nodded weakly. She had no real choice, only time, and that was running out fast. Jack gestured toward the motorcycles, then pointed down a narrow trail cutting into the trees, away from the highway. "We've got shelter," he said. "Heat, food." She hesitated. Every instinct screamed danger, yet every instinct also screamed survival. Jack met her eyes and spoke quietly, clearly. "Come with me." And in that moment, standing between the white death of the storm and the unknown men before her, Sarah understood one thing with terrifying clarity. The forest trail was quieter than the highway, almost unnervingly so. Snow weighed down the branches, bending the trees like silent witnesses bowing to a decision already made. The engines of the motorcycles faded behind them, but their presence lingered in the air with every breath Sarah took. She followed Jack closely. Her newborn was pressed against her chest, wrapped inside Jack's heavy leather jacket, which now shielded all three children from the worst of the cold. Emma and Lucy walked on either side of her, their boots slipping in the deep snow, but neither complained. Stopping was not an option. With every step, Sarah's thoughts raced. Was this a mistake? Had she just led her children into a different kind of danger? Behind them, the motorcycles shut off one by one. Jack raised a hand, signaling the group to stop. Through the trees, a small wooden cabin appeared, old, weathered, buried under snow, yet solid. A faint glow leaked from its windows. "Over here," Jack said. "Quick!" The moment the door opened, a wave of warm air rushed out. Tears filled Sarah's eyes before she could stop them. Not tears of fear, tears of relief. For the first time that night, warmth touched her skin. Inside, the scent of burning wood filled the room. An old heater crackled in the corner. The walls were lined with faded maps and hunting photos. It wasn't luxurious, but it was alive. One biker shut the door firmly behind them. Another removed his helmet and crouched near the baby. "Is he breathing okay?" the man asked quietly. Sarah nodded fast. "Yes, just very cold." Jack gave a short nod. "Blankets, hot water." They moved instantly, no arguing, no hesitation. Sarah lowered the children onto thick blankets laid across the floor. Emma exhaled deeply for the first time in hours. Lucy refused to release her mother's hand. Why are you out here?" Sarah finally asked, her voice small but steady. For a moment the room fell silent. Jack sat near the fire. The flames reflected in his eyes. "We were heading north," he said, "to a memorial." Sarah looked at him. "One of our brothers is buried out there," Jack continued. "Didn't make it through last winter." The words carried weight. Loss, she recognized. "And you?" Jack asked, lifting his gaze to meet hers. "Why were you on that road with kids in a storm like this?" The question struck deep. Sarah lowered her eyes. "My husband passed away," she said softly. "We lost the apartment. I was trying to reach family, anywhere safe." A biker with scarred hands spoke quietly, almost to himself. "This world doesn't go easy on the weak." Jack glanced at him, then back at Sarah. "But we don't turn our backs on children." The words were simple, yet they hit Sarah harder than anything else that night. For the first time, she didn't just see dangerous men, she saw responsibility. The heater hummed louder. The children's shivering slowly stopped. The newborn let out a faint sound, barely a cry. Sarah felt her chest loosen for the first time since the storm began. Suddenly, a powerful gust slammed against the cabin. The door rattled. Jack stood. "The storm's getting worse," he said. "We stay here till morning." Sarah nodded, though a new fear quietly crept in. What happens after morning? Jack seemed to sense it. We'll talk tomorrow, he said calmly. Right now, your kids need rest. Sarah wrapped the children tighter in the blankets. Her eyes grew heavy, but her mind stayed awake. She was sitting among men the world feared. Yet tonight, under their roof, her children were alive. And that truth unsettled her more than the storm ever had. The night moved slowly, as if time itself had decided to tread lightly. Outside, snow still fell, but the storm no longer roared with the same cruelty. Inside the cabin, the soft crackle of burning wood hummed like a lullaby, steady and reassuring. Sarah remained awake. She watched her children sleep. Emma lay peacefully for the first time in days. Lucy's small hand was still wrapped around the edge of her mother's coat. The newborn rested against Sarah's chest, breathing in calm, fragile rhythms. Every breath felt like a quiet miracle. Across the room, Jack and the other bikers sat in silence. There was no laughter, no bravado. Just tired men with weathered faces, their rough exteriors softened by the glow of the fire. They looked less like legends and more like people who had carried too much for too long. Sarah finally spoke. Thank you for what you've done. The words felt heavy, but necessary. Jack looked up. We didn't do anything special, he said calmly. We just did what needed to be done. Sarah gave a faint smile. Not everyone does. The sentence lingered in the air. No one rushed to fill the silence. After a moment, Ray, the quietest among them, spoke. Most people only see the jackets, he said softly. They don't bother looking past them. Sarah met his eyes. I was one of those people, she admitted. But tonight, I was wrong. Something shifted in the room. The distance between them didn't disappear, but it shrank. Jack stared into the fire. We're not saints, he said. Then he looked at Sarah. But when kids are involved, lines change. Sarah didn't fully understand why, but she believed him. Just then, Emma stirred. Her brow tightened slightly as she turned in her sleep. Sarah immediately knelt beside her, brushing her hair back. It's okay, sweetheart, she whispered. Emma's eyes fluttered open. She looked around the cabin, then her gaze settled on Jack. Uncle, she said quietly, you're not going to leave us in the morning, are you? The question was innocent, but fear hid behind it. Jack stood and walked over slowly, lowering himself to Emma's level so he wouldn't tower over her. No, he said gently. We won't go anywhere until you're safe. Emma studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. She drifted back to sleep. Jack returned to his place by the fire, but something in his posture had changed. The edges were softer. The rest of the night passed with little conversation. Someone adjusted a blanket, someone added wood to the fire. Quiet gestures replaced words. It was the kind of care that didn't ask for recognition. Sarah realized something then. These men didn't make promises. They showed up, and that mattered more. Hours later, the wind outside faded into a whisper. The storm was losing its grip. The forest felt still, not threatening, but calm. Jack glanced out the window. Morning's coming, he said. The road should be better. Sarah nodded, though a new feeling stirred inside her. Not fear, but uncertainty. What happens after morning? Jack seemed to sense it. We'll figure it out together, he said. No rushing decisions. For the first time in a long while, Sarah felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Relief. The night hadn't turned them into enemies. It had turned strangers into something quieter, stronger, trust. The first light of morning fell across the snow, and the forest seemed to exhale. The terror of the night had retreated, leaving behind a quiet that no longer felt threatening. Inside the cabin, everyone woke slowly, as if no one wanted to disturb the fragile calm that had settled over them. Sarah opened her eyes and immediately felt for her baby's breathing. Warm, steady, alive. A deep breath escaped her, as though she had finally regained control of her own body. Emma sat up. "Mom, did we make it?" Sarah brushed her hair back gently. "Yes, sweetheart." Lucy rubbed her eyes and looked around. "Where's the uncle?" Jack stood near the door, gazing outside. Morning light softened the sharp lines of his face, making him look less like a man carved from stone. He turned when he heard them. "I'm right here," he said. "Not going anywhere." Sarah rose slowly. Her legs were still weak, but her heart felt steadier than it had in days. She stepped closer to Jack. "You saved our lives," she said quietly. Jack nodded once, uncomfortable with the weight of the words. "Sometimes life gives you a second chance," he replied. "You just have to recognize it." Outside, the highway was partially cleared. The tracks of snowplows cut through the white landscape. The storm had passed, but its scars remained. Ray unfolded a map. "The nearest town is about 30 miles out," he said. "They've got a hospital and an emergency shelter." Sarah's heart jumped. "Could we go there?" Jack met her gaze. "We could," he said carefully, "but it'll be crowded. Long waits." The word wait tightened something in her chest. Her children had already endured too much. After a moment, Jack spoke again. "Our clubhouse is closer," he said. "It's warm, secure." The offer wasn't simple. Doubt flickered through Sarah's mind. Could she trust strangers again? Emma seemed to sense it. "Mom," she whispered. "They're good, right?" Sarah looked into her daughter's eyes. There was no fear there, only hope. "Yes," she said softly. "They are." Jack nodded decisively. "We'll take it one step at a time," he said. "Let the kids rest first. Then we head toward town." That word, "we," surprised Sarah, but it felt right. The bikes were prepared. Jack arranged an old but sturdy pickup truck so the children could ride safely inside. He took the driver's seat himself. As they drove, Sarah looked out the window for the first time without dread. The world was still cold, but it no longer felt hostile. From the back seat, Emma asked, "Uncle Jack, where's your home?" Jack smiled, a small, rare smile. "On these roads," he said, "but sometimes people become home too." The words stayed with Sarah. She knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. Decisions still waited for her. But she was no longer alone. After the frozen night, the morning hadn't just given them a path forward. It had given them possibility. The truck moved slowly along the narrow road, trees lining both sides like silent guardians of the journey. Snow still clung to the ground, but the sky had cleared. Thin rays of sunlight slipped through the windshield and touched Sarah's face, the kind of light that only comes after darkness. In the back seat, Emma and Lucy sat wrapped in blankets. The newborn rested quietly, as if the storm had finally released its grip on him. For the first time in days, Sarah didn't feel like she was falling apart. Soon, a building came into view. It wasn't impressive, just an old but solid hall, a few motorcycles parked outside. No large sign, no dramatic display, just a small emblem most people would overlook. "This is it," Jack said, "our clubhouse." A flicker of nervousness passed through Sarah. Not fear, unfamiliarity. Warmth greeted them the moment they stepped inside. The air smelled of wood and fresh coffee. Couches filled one corner, tables and chairs another. Photographs covered the walls. Smiling faces, long roads, and a few quieter images marked with names and dates. Who are they? Emma asked softly. Jack looked at the photos. Our brothers, he said. Some didn't make it back. Sarah understood then. This place wasn't just brick and wood. It was memory. A woman stepped forward, confident but kind. I'm Mary, she said. Are you all okay? Sarah nodded. Yes, because of you. Mary's attention immediately shifted to the children. They need rest and food first, she said firmly. Everything else can wait. Soup warmed on the stove. Cups were placed in small hands. Emma took her first sip and looked at her mother, gratitude written across her face without a single word. Sarah was shown to a small room, clean beds, thick blankets, quiet. She tucked the children in. They fell asleep within minutes. Sarah was alone. She sat on the couch, exhaustion weighing on her body, but her mind remained awake. Jack joined her. We won't keep you here if you don't want to stay, he said. It's your call. Sarah took a deep breath. I've spent too long letting others decide for me, she replied. Not anymore. Jack nodded. That's the right way. Silence settled between them. My husband was a good man, Sarah said suddenly. He just didn't get enough time. Jack listened carefully. Good people often leave quietly, he said, but their absence is loud. The words stayed with her. Evening approached. The clubhouse hummed with quiet life. No chaos, no menace. Just people going about their routines. The place didn't feel dangerous. It felt human. For the first time, Sarah allowed herself a thought she hadn't dared to have before. Maybe help doesn't always arrive in uniforms. She knew this shelter was temporary, but this roof, this pause, this kindness, it was real. Under the warmth of that roof, her broken heart began, at last, to consider healing. Night settled over the clubhouse once again, but this time it brought no fear with it. The cold stayed outside. Inside, there was warmth, light, and a quiet sense of calm. Sarah stood near the window, watching snow drift down slowly. It no longer felt like an enemy, just weather, something that came and went. The children were asleep. Their breathing was steady, peaceful. A silent gratitude filled Sarah's chest, too deep for words. In the main hall, Jack sat with a few of the others. Maps, papers, and half-empty coffee cups were spread across the table. It wasn't a secret meeting. It was planning, careful, responsible planning. When Jack noticed Sarah, he pulled out a chair. Sit, he said. This isn't a decision we make without you. The sentence caught her off guard. She wasn't used to her opinion being treated as something that mattered. We've looked at a few options, Jack said, pointing to the map. There's a family shelter in the nearest town, temporary housing, food assistance, school connections, all possible. Sarah listened quietly. And the other option? She asked. Ray answered gently. I know someone who works with a church outreach. They can help with clothes, supplies, especially for the kids. Sarah hadn't expected that. She'd never imagined these men knowing such details, caring about such things. I don't want to be a burden, she said softly. Jack shook his head immediately. You're not a burden. Then he added, We don't see help that way. Her eyes burned, but she steadied herself. Just then, Emma appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Mom, are we going back to the road? Sarah knelt in front of her. No, sweetheart, she said. We'll move forward carefully. Jack smiled at Emma. And this time you won't be alone. Emma nodded, satisfied. Morning preparations began soon after. Mary laid out clothes for the kids. Someone found proper shoes, small gestures, but Sarah knew these were the things that stitched life back together. She turned to Jack. Why are you all doing this? There's no obligation. Jack thought for a moment. Because we know how one bad day can change everything, he said. And because sometimes standing beside someone is enough. The answer wasn't dramatic. It wasn't sentimental. It was honest. By midday, they were ready to leave. Sarah paused at the clubhouse door and looked back. This place was no longer just shelter. It was a turning point. She reached out to Jack. I don't know what comes next, she said. But I know none of it would have happened without today. Jack clasped her hand briefly. The road ahead is yours, he said. We're just here to help you get started. The truck rolled forward onto the road. Sarah looked at her children, tired but hopeful. And in that moment, she understood. Trust isn't built in a single day, but it begins with one sincere step. And this was that beginning. The town slowly came into view. Snow thinned along the roadside, and signs of life returned. Small shops, a school building, and the hospital rising in the distance. As Sarah looked out the window, she realized she wasn't just changing locations. She was changing her direction. The truck stopped in front of the hospital. Jack shut off the engine and turned back. We'll walk in with you. The words lifted a weight from Sarah's shoulders. She knew what waited inside wouldn't be easy. Forms, explanations, decisions. But she wouldn't face them alone. Inside, the building was warm and bright, filled with quiet movement and voices. A nurse spotted the children immediately and brought chairs over. The newborn was examined carefully. Sarah's eyes followed every motion, her breath held tight. He's okay, the doctor finally said. Just exposure to the cold? Tears spilled freely then. Sarah tried to hide them, but Jack silently offered her a tissue. No questions, no commentary. A short while later, a social worker joined them. Her tone was calm and reassuring. We can arrange placement at a family shelter, she said, and help with school enrollment for the kids. Sarah nodded, though a knot formed in her chest. Could she really handle all this? Jack seemed to sense it. One step at a time, he said quietly. Just today. The shelter was modest but clean. Small rooms, a shared kitchen, children's drawings covered the walls. Temporary, but safe. Emma ran her hand across the bed. This is ours? For now, Sarah replied with a small smile. Lucy stood by the window. It's quiet here, she said. Sarah understood. Peace lived in small things. Jack and the others didn't linger. They spoke with the staff, completed paperwork, then stepped back without ceremony. Sarah stopped them at the door. I don't know how to thank you, her voice shook. Jack shook his head. You stood up and took the step, he said. We just pointed the way. Emma walked over and took Jack's hand. Will you come back tomorrow? Jack smiled. If you ask, I will. They left. The door closed softly. Sarah stood in the middle of the room. For the first time, there were no instructions, no noise, just her and her children. She inhaled deeply. This is mine now. That night, after the children slept, she sat at the table with the papers the social worker had given her. She read each one carefully, made notes, wrote down questions. This was the Sarah who had been lost for years, returning. The next morning, Emma asked about school. Lucy talked about making friends. For the first time, the future didn't terrify Sarah. She understood something important. Accepting help isn't weakness, and choosing to move forward is strength. This was her first step, supported by others, but taken on her own. And that made all the difference. Morning at the shelter felt different. There was no roar of motorcycle engines, no screaming wind through the forest, only children's laughter, the clatter of dishes, and the simple rhythm of a new day beginning. Sarah stood by the window, watching sunlight reflect off the snow, as if the world were being renamed, piece by piece. Emma sat at the small table holding her school registration forms. "Mom, I write my name here, right?" Her voice carried excitement. "Yes," Sarah said with a smile. "This is your place." Lucy picked up colored pencils and began drawing on the paper taped to the wall. A small house appeared, 2 windows, a door, smoke rising from a chimney. Sarah's chest tightened. Even in their dreams, children imagine safety. In the early afternoon, there was a gentle knock at the door. Mary stepped in, carrying 2 boxes filled with clothes and children's supplies. "These are from the community," she said. "Some people sent them without even asking names." Sarah opened the boxes. Socks, jackets, books, everything chosen with care, not show. For the first time, she realized that help didn't come from one person alone. It spread outward, becoming a circle. Near evening, Jack arrived. A thin folder rested in his hands. "I won't stay long," he said. "I just wanted to give you some updates." They sat together as Jack explained. There were part-time job opportunities through a local work program, after-school care options for the kids. "No pressure," he added. "Just paths." Sarah closed the folder. "I want to try," she said clearly. "For myself. For my kids." Jack nodded. "That's enough." Emma gathered her courage. "Uncle Jack, when will you come again?" Jack smiled softly. "When you need me." As he stood to leave, Sarah spoke. "You didn't make promises," she said. "But you stood with us." Jack paused. "Promises are loud," he replied. "Standing beside someone is quiet." That night, after the children were asleep, Sarah sat alone at the kitchen table. She spread out papers, made a simple budget, wrote down days of the week. Small things. But to her, they meant control, something she hadn't had in a long time. The next day, Emma went to school. Her uniform was plain, but her pride was bright. Lucy helped Mary bake cookies in the kitchen. The newborn rested in Sarah's arms, making soft sounds. Sarah looked at herself in the mirror. Tired, but standing straight. "I can do this," she told herself. That evening, Jack called. "Everything okay?" "Yes," Sarah replied. "Today was a good day." When the call ended, Sarah understood something important. Some promises don't need words. They arrive as timely phone calls, folders left at the door, and the quiet certainty that if things fall apart again, someone will listen. New foundations aren't built with noise. They're built with small, steady steps. And Sarah was taking those steps now, quietly, firmly, with her children beside her. Winter loosened its grip slowly. Snow still dusted the sidewalks, but the air no longer cut through clothing like a blade. For Sarah, the days had begun to feel less like survival and more like movement, cautious, deliberate progress forward. Emma had settled into school. Each afternoon she returned with stories, worksheets folded carefully in her backpack, and a growing sense of belonging. Lucy learned the names of other children at the shelter, her laughter echoing through the halls in ways that felt almost unfamiliar at first. The baby gained weight, color returning to his cheeks. Life, quietly, was repairing itself. Sarah started her part-time job at a small community center 3 mornings a week. The work wasn't glamorous, organizing supplies, answering phones, but it was steady, honest. Each paycheck felt less like money and more like proof. She was capable. One afternoon, Jack stopped by. He didn't announce himself, didn't interrupt. He stood near the doorway until Sarah noticed him. "Looks like you've been busy," he said. She smiled. "We're learning how to live again." They walked outside where patches of snow melted into dark pavement. The world felt different than it had weeks ago. Less threatening, more open. "I've been thinking," Sarah said, "about that night." Jack nodded. Hard to forget. I used to believe storms were punishment, she continued. That if things went wrong, it meant I'd failed somehow. Jack listened without speaking. But now, she said softly, I think storms just reveal what's already there. Jack looked at her then. And what did it reveal? That I wasn't as alone as I thought. The words settled between them. Emma ran toward them, holding a paper in her hands. Mom, I got a star! Sarah crouched to her level, pride shining through exhaustion. That's amazing. Emma glanced at Jack. Uncle Jack, do you want to come to my school play next week? Jack hesitated, then smiled. I'd like that. Later that evening, the shelter held a small community dinner. Long tables, mismatched chairs, shared dishes. People talked, laughed, passed plates without asking who owed what. Jack and a few of the bikers joined quietly, blending into the room like they belonged there. Someone raised a toast, not to heroes, not to miracles, but to second chances. Sarah looked around and realized something had shifted. The Hells Angels weren't whispers anymore. They were hands that carried boxes, voices that asked if anyone needed help, silhouettes that stayed until the job was done. As the night ended, Jack walked Sarah to the door. You won't need us like before, he said. Sarah nodded. I know. But, Jack added, we'll still be around. She smiled. That means more than you think. That night, after the children were asleep, Sarah stepped outside alone. The sky was clear. No snow, no wind. She breathed deeply and remembered the blizzard, the fear, the choice, the words that had changed everything. Come with me. The storm hadn't defined her. What followed had. And now, it was just a memory. Spring arrived without ceremony. No dramatic shift, no sudden warmth, just small changes that added up. Snow melted into streams along the sidewalks. Trees budded. The world moved forward, quietly insisting on life. So did Sarah. The shelter room that once felt temporary now held routine. Shoes lined up by the door, lunch notes tucked into backpacks, a calendar on the wall filled with appointments, school dates, work shifts. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. Emma's school play took place on a Friday evening. The auditorium buzzed with parents, folding chairs, scraping the floor. Sarah sat in the second row, Lucy on her lap, the baby sleeping against her chest. When Emma stepped onto the stage, searching the crowd, her eyes landed on Jack. He stood near the back, arms crossed, leather jacket unzipped, trying not to look like he belonged. But he did. Two other bikers stood nearby, quiet, respectful. Emma smiled. She didn't forget her lines. After the play, Emma ran straight to him. You came, Jack nodded. I said I would. Sarah watched from a distance, something warm settling in her chest. Not gratitude anymore. Something steadier. Later that week, Sarah signed the lease for a small apartment. 1 bedroom, a pull-out couch, thin walls. But it had a kitchen, sunlight through the window, and a lock she controlled. The day they moved in, a familiar rumble echoed outside. The bikes didn't stop long. Boxes were carried up the stairs, a crib assembled, a table fixed that wobbled. No speeches, no photos, just help. When it was done, Jack stood by the door. This is where we step back, he said. Sarah nodded. I know. She hesitated, then spoke. That night, you didn't just save us from the cold. Jack met her eyes. You saved yourself. She smiled because now she believed it. Weeks passed. Sarah's job expanded to full-time. Emma brought home spelling tests with stars. Lucy learned to ride a bike in the parking lot, Jack jogging beside her once, then letting go. The baby slept through the night. One afternoon, Sarah received a letter from the shelter. A thank you note. She smiled and placed it in a drawer, not as proof of struggle, but of distance traveled. On a clear evening, Sarah stood on her small balcony. Below, the street hummed with ordinary life. She thought about the blizzard, how close everything had come to ending, and how instead it had begun. Jack stopped by less often now, and that was the point. When he did, it was for coffee, for a quick check-in, for nothing urgent. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Sarah said, "People still talk about that night." Jack shrugged. "They always will." "They call you heroes." He shook his head. "No, heroes leave. We stayed until we weren't needed." Sarah understood then. The Hells Angels didn't change her life by taking control of it. They changed it by giving it back. As night settled, Sarah tucked her children into bed. Emma whispered, "Mom, do you think we're safe now?" Sarah kissed her forehead. "Yes," she said. "And if life gets hard again," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "we know how to ask for help." She turned off the light. Outside, the road stretched on, not cold, not empty, just open. The storm was gone. What remained was strength, carried forward quietly. Sometimes help doesn't arrive in the way we expect. It doesn't wear uniforms. It doesn't announce itself. And it doesn't ask for credit. This story isn't about bikers. It isn't about storms. It's about what happens when human beings choose not to look away. Every day, somewhere near you, a mother is standing in her own blizzard. A child is waiting for someone to stop. Not to rescue them forever, just to stand long enough for hope to breathe. Strength isn't never falling. Strength is accepting a hand when you're on the ground and learning to stand again. If this story moved you, let it remind you of one simple truth. Kindness doesn't need permission. If this story touched your heart, like this video so it reaches someone who needs it. Subscribe for more real, emotional stories about humanity, courage, and second chances. Comment below. Have you ever helped or been helped by a stranger? Share this story. Someone out there might be waiting for their "come with me" moment. Because sometimes, one choice, one pause, one act of courage can change a life forever.